So some of you may or may not have noticed I haven't been super active on like the social media platforms lately. And that's because a little over 2 weeks ago, we were busy renovating the van. So I have recently sold the van basically to a new owner in order to get a new van and do some other things. But I've had a lot of renovations that I've been having to work on, and so that's been my primary focus. And there was a day we were working on, I think it was the kitchen. So I rebuilt the whole kitchenette. And toward the end of the day, Archer jumped the fence here. And went out into the road. As you can hear it, it's not far. And and went out into the road and was hit by a car and passed away. It happened quick. A nice woman had pulled up and picked him up in a sweater she had, and she was actually a vet tech, and offered to take him to where she worked, which wasn't far from here, and I could follow. And yeah, so we took him and got him cremated. And so here he is in this little velvet bag. When I was in college, I moved into a house with a bunch of buddies, and one of my friends, Tommy, had already had Archer for about a year. And he was moving out and heading to LA, and he couldn't have a cat, or he couldn't have animals where he was moving. And so he thought it'd be best if he left Archer with the house of us, where he was used to, rather than uplifting him and then having him stay somewhere, with his family or something, because he couldn't go with him. And I immediately said, yeah, leave him here. We'll take care of him, and I'll take on the responsibility of him. And so, for the last 2 years of college, I had him. And then he was always like an indoor cat, and he would escape and get in a fight with the next door neighbor cat named Mo, which was always a thing, and we never wanted him to get out. But because of all the people we had living with us, I think there was 5 of us in that one house at one point, it was just impossible. As much as I tried, he'd always get out, and we'd have to go chase him. I can't tell you how many trees we've climbed getting him, and bushes we've jumped into, and places we have to crawl under, and cars and everything. He was a nightmare at times. And eventually we all graduated, and we kind of went different ways, but a few of us all moved to Indy to work, and we got an apartment together, and he moved in with all of us. And so he got used to it, but the apartment was really small for him, and he still managed to escape that apartment, even though we were on the second floor, and there were 2 doors he'd have to get through to get out. And he managed to get out, but that only happened once or twice, and we'd get him. And then, after a year living there, I was like, we need to get a house. This isn't gonna work. And so we a few of us went and moved into a house, and again we separated even more until it was just Andy and I and then his brother. And we lived in that house for 3 years, I think it was. And he escaped a few times there too. But he was still supposed to be like an indoor cat, and he was always trying to get out. He was always trying to get out. And occasionally I'd let him out, and if I could watch him in the backyard. But one time I went on a trip and he got out, and like Andy couldn't find him, and I was gone. And I like cut the trip short and came back. And luckily he had, the next day, Andy was driving down the road in the neighborhood and called his name, and he popped out and ran into Andy's car. And we got him. But he's always kind of, you know, he's been a troublemaker his whole life. And then I got the idea, you know, I'm gonna start this shoe company and I'm gonna live out of a van. And everyone was like, there's no way you could do that. There's no way you're gonna be able to live out of a van with your dog and your cat. And I was like, yeah, I will. I'll be able to do it. I think I could do this. And so after 3 years of being there, we flipped the van and started living out of that. And now I've been in this van for 3 years, which is longer, a lot longer than I thought I'd be in here. And the time just went like that. And, you know, when I first moved into the van, I was trying my best to keep him in there. And then I would put a harness on him, and I'd put him on a leash, and I'd let him out, run around and stuff like that. And he'd either slip out of that harness and bust off the leash and then run up a tree, and I'd chase him, or he'd go in a bush and I'd chase him. And we did that forever. And then sometimes he'd just escape. He'd just jump out. The second I opened the door, he'd be out. And I'd have to chase him and chase him and chase him and chase him. And then eventually, he did it so many times, I got frustrated, and I said, fine, if you're not gonna listen to me, you could stay outside for however long. I think it was like 2 hours. And then I called his name, and sure enough, he comes running back. And then from there, we just kept practicing that. I'd let him out for like an hour or two, and then I'd call him and he'd come back, and then it would be like 3 hours, and I'd call him and come back. And then after that, he could just hang out all day while I was doing things, you know, with the door open, and he'd come in and out and in and out. And he was always really good at staying near the van and staying near where we were. Like even when we went on trips, he'd go out and he'd run around, and if I call his name, he'd come back. And there was occasions where he didn't want to come back, and he would be like 2 feet away from me, and he would make me chase him, and I'd have to go under a vehicle or under something like little nook and try to pull his fat body out. And that was always a thing. But I came out here to Colorado about 6 months ago now. He wasn't used to the area, and plus when I first came out here, it was pretty cold. And so he wasn't really going out of the van too much. But as the temperatures warmed up, like I have to leave the doors open with the fans running and everything to keep it cool in there during the day. And we would all just hang out, you know, Rocky and I and him would either work outside here or work in the van, parked in my buddy's backyard, which is fenced in. And he started to jump the neighbors' fences. And I would chase him, you know, I would chase him and get him and bring him back and do the whole thing for I don't know how long. And eventually, like the neighbor here knew who he was, and we talked, and he was cool with him jumping over there. And then the neighbor here moved out, so it was just an empty yard. And it was just like, sure, you know, if you want to play in that yard here, go ahead. And if you want to fart around here, go ahead. You're going to keep doing it anyways. Like, I can't keep you stuck. And I trusted him, you know. We'd been doing this for 2.5 years at that point, and I thought, you know, like, okay, we're good. He's an outdoor cat. He's having an awesome life. He always would come back when I called him, and he'd do his little, like, churtle, yirpy cat meows and tell me about what he was doing or whatever, you know. He was super happy, and that made me happy, you know. But then recently he's been getting brave, and he became like a hunter cat. He was catching and bringing me all of these little rodents, and he must have got, you know, distracted or brave or bored, I don't know what, but something in him to go over this fence into this street here. And, you know, I feel pretty terrible. Keep thinking, you know, you should have kept a big harness on him, and you should have kept him leashed, and you should have did this, and you should have done that, and if you would have, and all this, shoulda, coulda, woulda, and he'd still be here, you know? And maybe that's true. And that was a risk I always took with living in a van with a cat and letting him run around and be an outdoor cat with the areas I was staying and going. But I have to keep telling myself that he was super happy, you know, he was super happy being an outdoor cat and hunting and running around and having his freedom. And even though he only lived to be 10, he had a pretty cool life. A lot cooler than most of the cats I know. And he traveled the country and got to feel sand under his paws and those terrible goat head thorn things, and snow and rock and gravel and grass, and climb trees, and he did all sorts of things that other cats wish they could do, and they're just stuck in a house. And that's what I just have to remember, I guess, and be thankful that I got to do all those things with him and share a lot of it with you guys. But he's still here in spirit, I guess. And so he'll still travel around with us, and maybe I'll make a little thing for him to stow these in, his little ashes in. And when I get this new van, I'll bring him along, and maybe I'll scatter his ashes on a future trip and some water or something, because he always loved doing that. Wherever there was like a open thing of water, he'd spill it over, because he loved watching it, like just water trickles. He's so, I don't know, this is like a weird quirk he had. But yeah. Lost a little buddy. And I might turn comments off for this, because it'll probably just take one bad one to wreck me. But I want to say thanks to everybody who got a laugh from him and commented about him, or bought little stickers of him and stuck them around, and you see him in your day-to-day. And yeah, thanks.